one thing I've learned in life is if you really like doing something, you can become better at it. So I started playing hockey at 11, but by the age of 14, I was sort of playing it so often, I think I was becoming quite good. And I went to a training camp for the future England hockey squad. I didn't get that good because I didn't make it into the England squad, but I did get given a diet sheet. And when I got given that diet sheet, I looked at it and I was like, oh my gosh, growing up, I've never really thought of food as anything other than, tastes nice and you get it 3 times a day and it's lovely. But suddenly I was like, oh, so actually if I eat more carbohydrates and I don't eat as much fibre before I go out and play or train, actually it's better for me and da-da-da. So that's really where it started. But I mean, I was at a school that was a state school, but it was quite high achieving. Quite a lot of people went to fairly good universities, and we were sort of actively, and we are talking the sort of late 80s, early 90s here, so we were actively sort of discouraged from doing anything that was sort of anology, except for, biology. So anything like that. And certainly nutrition was not a degree that we would have been encouraged to study for at that stage. It didn't even come up. As far as my school were concerned, I was going to be a PE teacher. And
oh, wow.
But I didn't go down that path.
No.
I took geography instead. Why not?
So like many sort of nutritional therapy practitioners, you started off in the corporate world and then you shifted your focus.
Yeah.
What was that like, being in the corporate world and then sort of wanting to move to a different place?
Yeah, one of the advantages of the time at which I was in the corporate world, I was in IT, it was a dot-com boom, I travelled the world. I was so lucky. I spent time in California, lived in Sydney for a year. I spent a couple of weeks in Tokyo, Scandinavia, and one thing I realised is that I was quite adventurous where food was concerned. I absolutely loved embracing the food culture. So wherever I was staying, you would never, ever see me go into the same restaurant twice. I certainly wouldn't have relied on fast food in any country. I would want to eat whatever was local, whatever was seasonal. So I knew there was something going on there. And interestingly, after I finished university, I was offered 2 jobs, and one was in IT and one was in food. So I think there was always a food undercurrent, but I hadn't quite anticipated it going in this direction. So when I was still playing hockey, I was playing at National League level now. So it was like a second career. So it was really full on. And I wasn't really probably looking after my body. So yes, I was eating well. I grew up in a place called St Albans. There's a market in St Albans, so I often would get to the market and get whatever they had left on the vegetable and fruit stalls at the end of the day, and I'd make whatever I could. That was batch cooking back then, with great produce for the week. So I was eating well, but I was not allowing my body to recover from the exercise I was doing. I was travelling all over the world. I was jet lagged, and eventually I got injured and stopped being able to play hockey. And at that point, I had just met my husband, and I kind of knew that things was probably transitioning, changing, and I happened to be in Sainsbury's. I picked up a book which was written by Patrick Holford, who of course founded IOM, and at the back of the book, having read the book cover to cover, not in the Sainsbury's queue, but when I took it home, I looked at there was an advert for a course, and I was like, that would be about the right time to be doing it. So came to the open day, and we are talking over 20 years ago now, and I started in 2003.
So how did you find nutrition at ION, and then what did that lead you to afterwards?
So when I started studying at ION, I honestly thought it was just a hobby. I thought, this will fit in well. I was still working then, but studying alongside. Then I got pregnant with my daughter, who's 18, going off to university in September, and I think I thought to myself, this is a really good thing to expand my knowledge right now. But I didn't really think of it as anything else. And I certainly wasn't thinking of it as a new career. But as we went through the course, and I took a year out to have my daughter, and both of my children were quite keen on being stuck to me as far as feeding was concerned. So I couldn't really get sort of away again. So it was quite difficult. So 2009, I graduated from ION, and I had seen during that period of time various people graduate, and I was watching what they were doing, and some weren't doing very much with the qualification, and some were doing amazing things, and I wanted to do amazing things. So that's when it changed for me. I kind of saw that there were some people that were, they were contracting to big food organisations, or they were running really, really successful clinics, or they were writing for magazines, they were writing books, and I wanted to be one of those people. I wanted to be a success, not for the success sake, but for somebody that could be able to use what they've just invested all that money in. Yeah. And so that's kind of where it ultimately, but it wasn't like I left ION and then got a book deal. It took, it wasn't that was my only objective, of course it wasn't, but 2018 my first book came out, so nearly, what's that, 9 years later.
That's amazing. And now, cut to today, you're doing all these workshops for big companies.
Yeah.
And you've written quite a few books.
Yes.
One of which, the Air Fryer Cookbook, has been in the Sunday Times bestseller list for a while.
Yeah, half a year now.
Half a year, that's amazing.
Yeah.
What does a week look like for you?
So I was just having a little look through my calendar at what I'd done this week, and I would say it's fairly typical of what I would do in a week. So there have been a few meetings about, I'm going to be filming with one of the big supermarkets as part of a campaign for some of the GB athletes with a view to these being used across that particular supermarket's social media. That's something I've got to think about a lot, because I'm obviously the person that's going to be talking about the nutrition, and I'm going to be preparing the recipes, but I also need to work very closely with a team of people. I've got to decide how many cameramen there will be, what sort of angles we're going to need, all of that sort of stuff. That takes a lot of planning. I'm also doing some talks, public speaking next week, and running workshops next week that I need to prepare for. I've created some recipe plans for one of the brands that I work with. But I've also seen just the one client this week, which may surprise people, but I very rarely do see clients now. It probably is sort of 2 or 3 a month. And most of the people that approach me to be seen on a one-to-one basis, I will refer on to others who specialise in the area that person seems to need most. So I see very, very few clients, and then a couple of corporate well-being opportunities. So I've been speaking at those. So that's a fairly typical week, so speaking, content creation, and planning.
And you're also working on your next book, aren't you?
Yeah, well, so my next book, the whole timeline for a book came as a bit of a shock to me, because this book will come out in 2023. It will come out in September 2023, the 12th, and. But I mean, I'd done my part pretty much by late February.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and even then that was a slight extension because of a bereavement. So it really is quite it's quite an interesting sort of timeline. A lot more drawn out than one might imagine. Let's just put it that way.
That is. And also, you're known as the Lunchbox Doctor. Mm-hmm. Where did that come from?
So it started because my name is so difficult to spell. So when I came to sort of naming what I do, I did already have a bit of a blog and an online presence as something called Not Just Sandwiches, and that's because my daughter, who was 5 at the time that I graduated, she was going to school and she was taking packed lunches, but she didn't really like bread, so I wasn't really sending her in with any sandwiches. So I was just sort of blogging about what I was doing as an alternative. And I think there were quite a few parents at the school that were quite interested in it. But obviously through social media, I reached quite a wide audience. And over the course of time, I sort of seemed to reach audiences globally with that idea as well. And I think from that, I realised that lunches were a bit of a thing. So when it came to renaming the business, that came in 2012 when I did a self-published book. I needed to rename the business, and Lunchbox Doctor we did a bit of surveying, and I worked with an agency, and that one came up. But of course the business has changed so much in many ways. I do talk about lunches still. I still try and bring back in, the cookery books are not specifically around lunches, but of course you can use them to prepare lunches, especially, taking things in a flask, or, if you've got things that you cook in an air fryer or things that you cook in a multi-cooker, you can eat them cold, or, so there's definitely a crossover there. But Lunchbox Doctor is stuck with me because, quite frankly, it's still easier to find me online. When people say the Lunchbox Doctor, I do a lot of interviews for media, and if you said Tschiesche, no one would know how to spell it or find it, so they can still find me when they want to.
And do you find that lunch in general is overlooked when it comes to food in this country, or?
Yeah, lunch is an interesting meal because I think it's gone through a bit of a